My parents accidentally left the call on, and I heard them tell my sister, "She's awful to live with, but we can't leave her, money's too good." I'm Margaret, and I'm 32 years old. One seemingly ordinary Tuesday evening shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. I just finished a video call with my parents, said my goodbyes, and set my phone down on the kitchen counter. That's when I heard it, voices crackling through the speaker. They hadn't disconnected. My father's voice came through first, cold and measured, like he was discussing a business transaction rather than his own daughter. "Living with her is exhausting. Honestly, I can barely stand it some days. But we can't go anywhere, not with her money keeping us comfortable." The words felt like ice water dumping over my head. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the phone, unable to move, unable to breathe. Before I could even begin processing what I'd heard, my sister Beatrice's laughter erupted through the speaker. It wasn't a nervous laugh or an uncomfortable chuckle. It was cruel, mocking, like she'd been waiting to hear those exact words. "I knew you felt that way. God, she's so clueless. Just keeps writing checks and thinking we actually enjoy her company." My stomach lurched. The phone felt like it was burning in my hand, but I couldn't hang up. I needed to hear everything. My mother joined in, her voice carrying that fake sweetness she used when talking about people she pitied. "Well, Margaret does try so hard to please everyone. It's almost sad, really. But as long as she's paying the mortgage and covering our expenses, we can manage putting up with her little quirks." Little quirks. They were talking about me like I was some annoying pet they tolerated for treats. I sank onto one of my kitchen bar stools, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. The marble countertop felt cold under my palms as I gripped its edge, trying to anchor myself to something solid while my world tilted sideways. Every kind word they'd ever said to me now felt like a performance. Every smile, every hug, every "we are so proud of you." Had any of it been real? Beatrice was still laughing, that sharp, cutting sound that seemed to echo in my skull. "Remember when she bought us those tickets to the Bahamas last year? I thought she was going to cry when we thanked her. Like a puppy desperate for approval." My father chuckled, actually chuckled, at that comparison. My own father, laughing at the idea of me being desperate for their love. The call continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. They discussed my recent promotion like it was their lottery win, calculated how much my Christmas bonus might be, and debated whether they could convince me to upgrade the house's HVAC system. Not once did anyone mention me with affection. Not once did anyone defend me. I was nothing more than a walking ATM to them. When they finally hung up for real, I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, my phone screen the only light. I couldn't cry. The hurt went too deep for tears, settling somewhere in my chest like a stone. Morning came too quickly. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night replaying that conversation in my mind, searching for some other interpretation that didn't crush me. But there wasn't one. The truth was simple and devastating. My family saw me as nothing more than a source of income. Still, I got up, got dressed, and headed downstairs to make breakfast like I did every Wednesday morning. The kitchen at my house in Austin smelled like the coffee I'd started brewing on autopilot. I moved through the familiar routine, setting out plates, pulling bacon from the refrigerator, cracking eggs into a bowl, but everything felt different now. I was watching myself perform from a distance, playing the role of dutiful daughter and sister while my real thoughts churned beneath the surface. I had to act normal. Had to observe them without letting on that I'd heard every devastating word. My father entered first, his silver hair still damp from his morning shower. He grabbed his favorite University of Texas mug without glancing in my direction, his attention immediately absorbed by his tablet propped against the fruit bowl. "Morning," he muttered, barely audible, his eyes scanning news headlines. I noticed how he angled himself slightly away from me, like even making eye contact required too much effort. Had he always done that? How had I never noticed? I responded with a carefully neutral good morning, watching him over the rim of my own coffee cup. His jaw was tight, and he kept shifting in his seat. Guilt? Or was he just eager to escape to the den where he spent most of his retired days? My mother breezed in moments later, her voice unnaturally bright. "Gorgeous morning, isn't it? I was thinking we could go to that new boutique in the Domain later. You know, the one with those Italian handbags I mentioned." The request hung in the air between us. Italian handbags. Probably $500 minimum. I smiled and nodded, my face muscles cooperating even as my mind catalogued this as yet another expense they expected me to cover. Sure, Mom. Sounds nice. She beamed at me, but I caught the way her eyes flicked to my father, almost triumphant. She'd secured her shopping trip. Mission accomplished. Beatrice was the last to appear, slouching into the kitchen with her phone glued to her hand. At 35, my older sister had mastered the art of looking perpetually put upon by life's basic demands. Her greeting was a vague grunt in my general direction before she slumped into a chair, thumbs flying across her screen. I'd made her favorite, blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, but she didn't even glance at the plate I set in front of her. How's the boutique going? I asked, keeping my tone light and interested. Beatrice ran a small clothing store in South Congress, or at least she claimed to run it. From what I could tell, she mostly took aesthetic photos for social media while her staff did the actual work. She shrugged without looking up. Fine. Busy. You know how it is. I didn't know how it was, actually, because she never gave me any real details about her business. What I did know was that I'd loaned her $15,000 18 months ago to help with inventory issues, and she'd never mentioned paying it back. Not once. Watching her scroll mindlessly through what looked like a fashion influencer's feed, I felt something sharp twist in my chest. This was the same sister who'd laughed so cruelly on that call. I turned back to the stove, flipping bacon that didn't need flipping, just to have something to do with my hands. Behind me, I could hear my mother chattering about a neighbor's remodeled kitchen, my father's occasional grunt of acknowledgement, Beatrice's silence. We looked like a family. We sounded like a family. But I finally saw what we really were. 3 people using me, and 1 person who'd been too blind to see it. After breakfast, I retreated to my home office under the pretense of starting work early. In reality, I opened a fresh document on my laptop and started typing. Wednesday Morning Observations, I titled it. Then I began listing everything I'd noticed. Dad's avoidance, Mom's immediate shopping request, Beatrice's indifference. I needed to document this. Needed proof that I wasn't imagining the shift, even though the shift wasn't in them, it was in my perception. By Friday afternoon, I couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion any longer. I'd spent 2 days watching my family with new eyes, cataloguing their behavior, but observations alone weren't enough. I needed concrete evidence. So I did something I'd never done before. I started examining my own bank accounts like they belonged to a stranger, looking for patterns I'd been too trusting to notice. I pulled up my primary checking account first, the one I used for the household expenses. My salary as a senior software engineer at a tech company downtown was substantial, more than enough to cover my own needs with plenty left over. I'd always been generous with that surplus, never thinking twice about helping family. But now, scrolling through 6 months of transactions, I felt physically ill. A $300 charge at Fleming's Steakhouse, on a Tuesday night when I'd been working late. I'd never been to Fleming's on a Tuesday in my life. I cross-referenced the date with my calendar. That was the night Mom had texted saying she and Dad were grabbing a quick bite since I wouldn't be home for dinner. Quick bite. $300. I kept scrolling, my heart rate climbing with each questionable charge. A $500 payment to a luxury spa. A $4,000 transfer labeled home improvements that I'd never approved or even discussed. Subscriptions to streaming services I didn't use. Monthly charges to upscale gyms I'd never visited. The pattern was unmistakable. They weren't just living in my house rent-free, they were systematically draining my accounts. I pulled out a legal pad and started tallying the unauthorized expenses, my handwriting growing shakier with each line. The numbers climbed past 10,000, then 20,000, then higher. 6 months of unchecked spending that I'd been too naive to monitor. My phone buzzed with a text from Beatrice. Can you spot me $500 for new inventory? Business has been slow. I stared at the message, then at the spreadsheet of fraudulent charges on my screen, and something inside me hardened. Instead of responding, I opened my secondary savings account, the one connected to my main checking for overdraft protection. This account held a significant portion of my inheritance from my grandfather, a man who'd built a successful accounting firm from nothing and left me a substantial sum when he passed 3 years ago. I'd used part of it as a down payment on this house in Austin's Westlake neighborhood, specifically so my family could live comfortably with me. The rest I'd kept liquid, accessible for emergencies or family needs. Except I was now looking at transfers out of that account too. Large ones. I clicked on the first transaction. $8,000 moved to an account I didn't recognize. The transfer memo said emergency family expense. What emergency? I hadn't authorized this. My hands were trembling as I pulled up the account details and saw the receiving account holder, Beatrice Calloway. My sister's full legal name. I slumped back in my office chair, the leather creaking under my weight. She had access. Somehow, Beatrice had access to my savings account. I tried to remember if I'd ever given her my account information, maybe for some legitimate reason I was now forgetting. But no clear memory surfaced. The only explanation was that she'd gotten it through my parents, the same parents I'd given limited access to for household expenses, trusting them completely. That trust had been spectacularly misplaced. Over the next hour, I traced every suspicious transfer back to either my mother, my father, or Beatrice. Sometimes the money moved through several accounts, a clumsy attempt at hiding the trail. But it all led back to them. They'd been systematically siphoning off my inheritance, funding Beatrice's failing business and their own lifestyle upgrades, all while I worked 50-hour weeks to maintain the very accounts they were robbing. I felt violated in a way I couldn't fully articulate. This wasn't just about money, though the amounts were staggering. This was about the complete destruction of trust. Every time I'd handed Dad cash for car repairs, every time Mom had asked me to cover a medical copay, every tearful conversation with Beatrice about her struggling business, all lies. Calculated, coordinated lies designed to extract as much as possible, while keeping me compliant and generous. My phone rang. Mom's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail, unable to trust myself to speak to her without revealing what I'd discovered. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront them until I had a plan. The voicemail notification appeared seconds later. I played it on speaker, her cheerful voice filling my office. Margaret, honey, just calling to see if you're free this weekend. Your father and I were thinking about taking a trip to Fredericksburg, and would love for you to join us. My treat. Her treat. With my money. I ended the voicemail and opened my contact list, scrolling to a name I hadn't called in months. Natalie Torres, a corporate attorney I'd worked with on some company contracts. We'd become friendly over lunch meetings and occasional happy hours. If anyone could help me navigate this mess, it was her. I typed out a text. Need legal advice. Personal matter. Are you available this weekend? Her response came back within minutes. Absolutely. Coffee tomorrow at 10. Relief washed over me, though it did nothing to ease the anger still burning in my chest. I had evidence now. Numbers didn't lie, even when families did. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out how to protect what was left of my assets. Tonight, I'd have to sit through dinner with the people who'd been stealing from me, pretending everything was normal while I planned my next move. I'd been planning this moment for 3 days, and still my heart hammered against my ribs as I called everyone to the dining room Sunday evening. The table was set with the good china, my grandmother's delicate blue-rimmed plates that Mom always insisted we use for special occasions. The irony wasn't lost. On me. This was certainly going to be special, just not in any way they expected. Mom had made pot roast, Dad's favorite, and the smell of beef and carrots filled the house. Beatrice arrived late as usual, breezing in with her oversized designer sunglasses still perched on her head despite the sun having set an hour ago. They settled into their usual seats, completely oblivious to the storm about to break over their heads. I watched them serve themselves, make small talk about the weather, and suddenly I couldn't stand another second of pretending. I heard your phone call last week, I said, my voice cutting through Mom's rambling story about the grocery store. The one where you didn't hang up properly. I heard everything you said about me. The dining room fell silent except for the sound of Dad's fork clattering against his plate. Mom's face drained of color, her hand frozen halfway to her water glass. Beatrice's eyes went wide, then narrowed, calculating how to respond. Margaret, sweetheart, I don't know what you think you heard, but, Dad started, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was overreacting about something. I cut him off, pulling out my phone and setting it on the table. You said, and I quote, living with her is exhausting. I can barely stand it some days. But we can't go anywhere, not with her money keeping us comfortable. Does that refresh your memory? Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Beatrice had the audacity to laugh, though it sounded forced and brittle. Oh, come on, Margaret. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. We were just venting. Everyone complains about their family sometimes. It doesn't mean anything. Her casual dismissal made my blood boil. This wasn't casual venting. This was calculated cruelty, made worse by the fact that they'd continued living under my roof, eating my food, spending my money while harboring such contempt for me. It wasn't just venting, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage threatening to spill over. Because I also found something interesting when I started looking at my bank statements. Thousands of dollars in unauthorized charges. Transfers to accounts I never approved. Money flowing out of my inheritance, the one from Grandpa James, directly into Beatrice's business account. I pulled out the printed statements I'd prepared, sliding them across the table. Care to explain these? Dad picked up the papers, his face turning red as he scanned the numbers. Now, Margaret, this is just a misunderstanding. We had access to that account for emergencies, and we considered Beatrice's business struggles an emergency. Family helps family. That's what your grandfather would have wanted. The manipulation was breathtaking. Using Grandpa James's memory to justify theft. My grandfather, who'd built his wealth through careful planning and honest work, would have been appalled. Family helps family, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness of those words. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like family steals from family. Family lies to family. Family mocks family behind their back while pretending to love them to their face. Mom started crying, delicate tears that I'd seen her deploy countless times to get out of uncomfortable situations. We do love you, Margaret. You have to believe that. We made some mistakes. Poor judgment. But it came from a good place. Beatrice wasn't even bothering with the emotional manipulation. She crossed her arms, defiant. You know what your problem is, Margaret? You're uptight. You've always been uptight. So we spent some of your precious money. You have plenty. You're not exactly hurting. This whole victim act is really unbecoming. That did it. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. Get out. All of you. I want you out of my house by tomorrow morning. The crying stopped. The defiance faltered. Dad stood too, his face now purple with indignation. You can't be serious. This is our home. We've lived here for 3 years. I met his gaze without flinching. No, Dad. This is MY home. My house that I bought with MY inheritance. Your guests who have severely overstayed your welcome. And since you were just tolerating living with awful me for my money anyway, this should come as a relief. Now you can go be miserable somewhere else. Mom reached for my hand across the table. Margaret, please. Don't do this. We can fix this. We can go to family therapy. We can make this right. I pulled my hand away. There's nothing to fix. You showed me exactly who you are. You just didn't know I was watching. I looked at each of them in turn. My father's impotent rage, my mother's manipulative tears, my sister's bitter resentment. You have until noon tomorrow. Take your personal belongings. Everything else stays, considering it was bought with my money. Beatrice shoved back from the table violently. Fine. Who wants to live with you anyway? You're just as miserable as we always said you were. Enjoy your lonely house and your money since that's all you care about. She stormed toward the stairs, already on her phone, probably texting friends about what a terrible person I was. Mom and Dad sat frozen, seemingly unable to process that their comfortable arrangement was ending. I've already changed the locks, I added, pulling out 3 new keys from my pocket and setting them on the table. These will work until tomorrow at noon. After that, I'm having the security system reset. Don't try to come back. I walked out of the dining room, leaving the pot roast and the good china and 3 people who'd never actually be my family at all. In my office, I locked the door and finally let myself shake. The confrontation had taken every ounce of strength I had, but it was done. They knew I knew. And tomorrow, they'd be gone. Monday morning arrived with cruel cheerfulness, brilliant sunshine streaming through my bedroom windows, birds singing in the oak tree outside. I'd barely slept, lying awake listening for sounds of my family packing, moving around in the rooms above and beside mine. Around 7, I heard the first suitcase wheels rolling across the hardwood floors upstairs. Then voices, hushed and urgent. I stayed in my room, door locked, until I heard the front door open and close multiple times. By 9:30, I worked up the courage to venture out. The house felt different immediately, like a held breath finally released. Mom's collection of decorative pillows was gone from the living room sofa. Dad's reading glasses no longer sat on the side table. The kitchen counter, usually cluttered with Beatrice's protein shake bottles and Mom's fashion magazines, stood empty. They'd taken their things as instructed, leaving behind only the furniture and household items I'd purchased. I walked through each room methodically, checking what was gone, what remained. In the guest bedroom my parents had occupied, the closet stood open and empty. The bathroom counter showed rings where Mom's expensive skincare products had been. A note sat on the stripped bed, my mother's handwriting flowing across expensive stationery. Margaret, I hope you'll reconsider. We're staying at the Hilton on Barton Springs Road until we can find something more permanent. Please call when you're ready to talk. Love always, Mom. Love always. The words felt hollow, performative. I crumpled the note and dropped it in the bedroom wastebasket. Beatrice's room was next. She'd taken everything, even the throw pillows I'd bought to match the bedding. Unlike our parents, she'd left no note, no plea for reconciliation. Just an empty room that still smelled faintly of her perfume, a cloying floral scent that gave me an instant headache. Good riddance. My phone had been buzzing all morning, but I'd ignored it. Now, standing in the quiet house that was finally mine alone, I pulled it out to see 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most were from Mom, variations on the same theme. Please reconsider. We can fix this. You're throwing away your family. Dad's messages were shorter, more demanding. This is ridiculous. Call me immediately. You're making a huge mistake. Beatrice's messages were the most illuminating. The first few echoed our parents' pleas, but quickly devolved into anger. You've always been jealous of me. This is really who you are, petty and vindictive. Good luck finding anyone who'll put up with you. That last one made me laugh, an actual laugh that echoed in my empty house. She still thought this was about me being difficult, about my character flaws. She couldn't comprehend that this was about consequences for theft and betrayal. I deleted all the messages without responding and opened a new text thread, this time to Natalie, my attorney friend. We'd met Saturday as planned, and she'd listened to everything with professional calm before laying out my options. Her text from this morning was direct. Are they out? I typed back, yes. House is empty. Her response came immediately. Perfect. I'll have the cease and desist letters sent today. They should receive them by end of business tomorrow. Those letters would formally demand they stop accessing any of my accounts and return any stolen funds. Natalie had been blunt about our chances of actually recovering the money, slim to none unless we pursued criminal charges, which would mean involving police and potentially sending my family to jail. I wasn't ready for that step. Not yet. But I was ready to protect what remained. I'd already moved the bulk of my inheritance to a new bank entirely, one they had no connection to. By afternoon, I was sitting in my home office attempting to focus on work when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone and saw my mother standing on the porch, dressed immaculately as always, her face carefully composed. I considered ignoring her, but something made me walk to the door. I opened it but didn't step aside to let her in. She looked smaller somehow, less imposing without the backdrop of my house as her residence. Margaret, honey, can we please talk? Really talk. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. No more tears. Perhaps she'd realized they weren't effective anymore. I leaned against the doorframe, creating a physical barrier between us. What's there to talk about, Mom? You said what you really thought of me. You took money that wasn't yours. Multiple times. What conversation could possibly fix that? She flinched at my blunt assessment but pressed on. We were wrong. I know we were wrong. But you have to understand, we've been struggling financially for years. Your father's retirement fund wasn't as substantial as we'd hoped. Beatrice's business kept needing more investment. We didn't know what else to do. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, finally showing genuine emotion. Desperation, not remorse. She was desperate because her meal ticket had just evaporated. "You could have asked me honestly," I said, my voice hard. "You could have come to me like adults and said, 'We are having financial problems. Can you help?' Instead, you decided to steal from me while mocking me behind my back. There's no excuse for that, Mom. No justification that makes it okay." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "Your grandfather would want you to help family," she tried, deploying the manipulation Dad had attempted at dinner. "Grandpa James would want me to stand up for myself," I countered. "He spent his whole life building something from nothing, and he left that money to me, specifically to me, because he trusted me to use it wisely. What you did was spit on his memory and my trust." Mom's face crumpled then, real emotion finally breaking through. "We have nowhere to go, Margaret. That hotel is expensive. We can't afford a decent apartment on what we have. Your father's Social Security barely covers groceries." For a moment, just a moment, I felt that old familiar pull, the urge to fix their problems, to make everything okay. But then I remembered that phone call, Beatrice's cruel laughter, years of lies and manipulation disguised as family love. "You'll figure it out," I said softly. "Like millions of people figure it out every day. You're both adults. You'll manage." I started to close the door. "Don't do this," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Please, Margaret. We're your parents. Doesn't that mean anything?" I paused, looking at this woman who'd raised me, who I'd loved unconditionally for 32 years. "It used to mean everything," I said honestly. "That's why this hurts so much." Then I closed the door and turned the new deadbolt, the click echoing in my empty foyer. I walked back to my office and sat down, my hand shaking. The house was quiet. But for the first time in days, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt like possibility. 3 months passed before I could see my situation as anything other than a gaping wound. The house slowly transformed from a hollow reminder of betrayal into something that felt like mine. I repainted the guest bedrooms, covering Mom's beloved sage green with a warm ivory and replacing Beatrice's dramatic charcoal grey with a soft blue. Each brush stroke felt therapeutic, like I was literally covering up their presence and creating space for something new. I'd changed my phone number, keeping only a handful of people in my contact list: work colleagues, actual friends, Natalie. My family's attempts to reach me had been relentless at first. Calls from unknown numbers that I learned to ignore, emails that went directly to a filtered folder, even a letter from Dad's attorney threatening legal action for emotional distress. Natalie had handled that one with professional efficiency, sending back documentation of their financial theft that shut down any legal posturing immediately. Work became a refuge in ways it had never been before. I threw myself into a major project, redesigning the architecture for our company's flagship product. My boss mentioned my renewed focus in our one-on-one meetings, pleased with the results but concerned about my well-being. "You seem different," he'd said carefully during our last check-in. "More driven but also lighter somehow." I'd smiled and told him I'd removed some toxic influences from my life. He'd nodded knowingly and changed the subject. The truth was I felt simultaneously lighter and heavier. Lighter because I no longer carried the burden of people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. Heavier because grief took up surprising amounts of space in my chest. Grief for the family I'd thought I had, for the relationships that had never actually existed the way I'd imagined them. I'd lost 3 people but gained something invaluable: clarity about who I was without their distorting influence. Natalie became an unexpected friend during this period. What had started as a professional relationship evolved into actual friendship as she checked in regularly, took me to dinner when she sensed I was spiraling, and introduced me to her friend circle: smart, accomplished women who had their own complicated family stories. One evening at a wine bar in downtown Austin, listening to someone else talk about setting boundaries with toxic relatives, I realized I wasn't alone. My story wasn't unique. That both comforted and saddened me. I heard updates about my family through an acquaintance who worked at the same church my mother attended. They'd found a small apartment in Pflugerville, a far cry from the Westlake house they'd grown accustomed to. Mom had taken a job at an upscale boutique in the Domain, ironic considering all the money she'd spent there on my dime. Dad worked part-time at a Home Depot, his pride apparently swallowed by necessity. The acquaintance who shared this information clearly expected me to feel guilty, to rush in and rescue them. I felt nothing except a vague sense of distance, like hearing about strangers having difficulties. Beatrice's situation was apparently worse. Her boutique had closed entirely, unable to survive without the constant influx of my money. She tried crowdfunding to restart the business, but her social media presence had taken a hit after she'd posted a long, rambling rant about me, not naming me directly but making it obvious to anyone who knew us. Friends had turned on her, pointing out the entitlement dripping from every word. Part of me, a small, petty part one wasn't proud of, felt vindicated by their struggles. But mostly I just felt sad. Sad that they'd valued money over genuine relationship. Sad that I'd spent 32 years loving people who'd seen me as a bank account. Sad that we couldn't have just been honest with each other from the start, before everything became poisoned by lies and theft. By month 4, I started dating someone I'd met through work, a project manager named Jared who had no connection to my family drama and no expectations beyond spending time together. We kept things casual, but I found myself looking forward to our dinners, to conversations that weren't weighted down by betrayal. He asked about my family once, early on, and I gave him the abbreviated version. We are not close anymore. It's complicated. He'd accepted that without prying, and I appreciated his boundaries. I also started seeing a therapist, something I probably should have done years ago. Dr. Wallace was a middle-aged woman with a direct manner that I found refreshing after a lifetime of my family's manipulation. She helped me unpack patterns I hadn't recognized, how I'd learned to equate love with financial support, how I'd tolerated poor treatment because family is forever, how I'd ignored my own needs to keep everyone else comfortable. The sessions were exhausting but necessary. You've spent your entire adult life caretaking, Dr. Wallace observed during one session. Who takes care of Margaret? I hadn't had an answer then, but I was learning. I was learning to cook meals I enjoyed, not just what everyone else preferred. To decorate my house in ways that pleased me. To spend my money on things I wanted, a new laptop, a weekend trip to New Mexico, an expensive ergonomic office chair that made my workdays more comfortable. Small acts of self-care that felt revolutionary. The house in Westlake felt like home now in a way it never had when I'd shared it. I hosted a small dinner party for Natalie and her friends, feeling nervous but excited about filling my space with people who actually enjoyed my company. We drank wine, laughed at stupid stories, and stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. After everyone left, I stood in my cleaned kitchen feeling happy. Genuinely happy, without the underlying anxiety that had colored everything when my family lived here. My bank accounts recovered slowly but steadily. Without 3 additional people draining my income, I was actually able to save substantial amounts. I met with a financial advisor, someone Natalie recommended, and set up proper protections, retirement accounts, investments. You're in excellent shape, the advisor had told me. A few more years of this, and you could retire early if you wanted. The idea was intoxicating, building a future on my own terms, without anyone else's hands in my pockets. But recovery wasn't linear. Some days I'd find myself crying over old photos, missing the version of my family I'd thought existed. Other days I'd feel angry all over again, furious at their betrayal and my own blindness. Dr. Wallace assured me this was normal, that grief doesn't follow a neat timeline. I learned to sit with uncomfortable feelings instead of immediately trying to fix them or push them away. It was a skill my family had never modeled, always preferring to gloss over problems or blame someone else. A year after that devastating phone call, I stood in my bathroom getting ready for a work event, and caught my own reflection in the mirror. I looked different, not just older, but more present somehow. The permanent tension I'd carried in my shoulders had eased. My smile, when it came, reached my eyes. I'd lost weight not from stress, but from finally having the energy to take care of myself, to cook healthy meals and go for morning runs in my neighborhood. My phone buzzed with a text from Beatrice. I'd blocked her number months ago, but she'd apparently gotten a new one. Margaret, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted to apologize. Really apologize. I was awful to you. I see that now. Mom and Dad too, though they're too proud to admit it. What we did was wrong. I'm not asking for forgiveness or money or anything. Just wanted you to know I'm sorry. I read it 3 times, analyzing every word for hidden manipulation. But it seemed genuine. I sat on my bed, phone in hand, considering how to respond, or whether to respond at all. Beatrice had sent similar messages before, earlier in the year, but they'd all been couched in justifications. "I'm sorry you felt hurt," rather than "I'm sorry I hurt you." This was different. This acknowledged actual wrongdoing. But did that mean I owed her a response? Did acknowledgement of harm require my immediate forgiveness? Dr. Wallace and I had discussed this possibility in therapy. What I'd do if family members apologized. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness," she'd said. "Forgiveness is something you grant when and if you're ready, for your own peace. Not because someone demands it or because you think you should." I'd taken that advice to heart over the months, realizing how much of my life I'd spent doing things because I should, supporting family because I should, accepting poor treatment because family should stick together, sacrificing my own needs because that's what good daughters should do. After 5 minutes of staring at Beatrice's message, I typed a careful response. "I appreciate you saying that. I'm not ready to have you back in my life right now. Maybe someday. I hope you're doing okay." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Her response came quickly. "I understand. Take care of yourself, Margaret." Then nothing else. No guilt trip, no pleading, no demands. Maybe she had changed. Or maybe this was just another manipulation. Either way, I'd set my boundary and she'd respected it. The work event that evening was a celebration for our team's successful product launch. I arrived at the downtown venue, a renovated warehouse space with exposed brick and string lights, feeling genuinely excited rather than obligated. Jared met me at the entrance, looking handsome in a dark blazer, and we walked in together. Over the past year, our casual dating had evolved into something more serious, though we'd both been careful not to rush. "You look amazing," he said, and I believed him. I'd bought a new dress for the occasion, emerald green with a flattering cut, and actually felt beautiful wearing it. Not performing beauty for someone else's approval, but genuinely comfortable in my own skin. We mingled with colleagues, and I found myself laughing easily, contributing to conversations without the constant undercurrent of anxiety I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying for years. My boss pulled me aside during the cocktail hour. "Margaret, I wanted to let you know we are creating a new senior architect position, and I'd like you to apply. Actually, I'd like you to have it, but HR requires we post it formally." The promotion would come with a significant raise and more autonomy over project direction. A year ago, my first thought would have been how this extra income could help my family. Now, my first thought was about what I could do with it for myself, maybe buy a small vacation property, or fund that master's degree I'd always wanted. "Thank you," I told him, meaning it deeply. I'd be honored. He clapped my shoulder and moved on to network with other guests. Jared raised his glass to me from across the room, having witnessed the conversation, his smile proud. This was what support looked like, someone celebrating my success without immediately calculating how they could benefit from it. The contrast to my family's treatment felt stark and clarifying. Driving home that night, Jared in the passenger seat scrolling through photos from the event, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. We'd been having conversations lately about moving in together, about what a shared future might look like. The idea terrified and excited me in equal measure. After what I'd been through, trusting someone with my space, my literal and metaphorical space, felt monumental. "I've been thinking about what you said last week," Jared said as we pulled into my driveway. "About being scared to let someone in again. I get it, Margaret. I really do. And I want you to know, I see you. Not your paycheck, not what you can do for me. Just you. And I like what I see." His directness was one of the things I loved about him. No games, no hidden agendas. Just honest communication. I reached over and took his hand. "I know. That's why I'm trying. Why I want to try." We sat in the car for another few minutes, talking about logistics, timelines, concerns. He had his own house in Hyde Park, and we discussed whether to sell one, rent one, or keep both for now. The conversation felt adult, collaborative. We were partners trying to solve a problem together, not one person making demands while the other accommodated. Inside my house, I checked my mail, actual physical mail that still accumulated despite most bills being digital. Among the catalogs and credit card offers was a cream-colored envelope with familiar handwriting. My mother's. I held it for a long moment, debating whether to open it or throw it directly in the recycling. Curiosity won. I slit the envelope carefully and pulled out a single sheet of stationery. "Dear Margaret," it began. "I won't insult you by saying I understand what you've been going through this year, because I don't. I can't. What we did to you was inexcusable, and I've spent many nights lying awake thinking about how we justified it to ourselves. You deserved better from us. From me. I was your mother. I should have protected you, not used you. I don't expect you to respond to this. I'm not asking for money or reconciliation or anything except that you know I'm truly sorry. You were right about everything. We were wrong. I hope you're happy, sweetheart. I hope you've built a life that brings you joy. Love always, and this time I mean it, Mom." I read it twice, then set it on my kitchen counter. Unlike Beatrice's text, this letter didn't make me want to respond. Mom's apology felt more complete, less like she wanted something from me. But it also felt late. A year late. She was sorry now that she'd experienced consequences, now that her comfortable life had evaporated. Would she have been sorry if I'd never overheard that call? If I'd just kept funding their lifestyle indefinitely? Dr. Wallace would probably say I was being uncharitable, that I should acknowledge growth wherever I found it. But I'd also learned in therapy that I didn't owe anyone access to my life just because they apologized. Apologies didn't erase harm. They were a starting point for repair, not a demand for immediate forgiveness. And I wasn't ready. Maybe I never would be, and that was okay. I could hold both truths. My mother might genuinely regret her actions, and I could still choose not to have her in my life. The next morning was Saturday, and I'd planned to spend it working on my garden, a new hobby I'd picked up over the summer. There was something deeply satisfying about planting things, nurturing them, watching them grow. Tomatoes, herbs, a few flowers that attracted butterflies. As I knelt in the dirt, pulling weeds, and checking on my pepper plants, I thought about growth in a broader sense. How much I'd grown this year. How painful that growth had been, but also how necessary. My phone rang. "Natalie. Hey, are you free for brunch? I have news." 20 minutes later, I was showered and heading to our favorite spot, a Mexican restaurant on South Congress that made incredible migas. Natalie was already there, looking excited. "I'm getting married," she announced as soon as I sat down, flashing a ring I'd somehow missed when we hugged. "Proposed last night. We're thinking next spring." I jumped up to hug her again, genuinely thrilled. "That's amazing. Tell me everything." She launched into the story, romantic proposal on Mount Bonnell at sunset, complete surprise even though they'd been together 5 years, and I listened, asked questions, celebrated with her. This was what friendship looked like, I realized. Mutual support, genuine happiness for each other's victories, showing up because you wanted to, not because you were obligated or expected something in return. "I want you to be a bridesmaid," Natalie said, catching me off guard. "I know we haven't known each other that long in the grand scheme of things, but you've become one of my closest friends. You've been there through one of the hardest years of my life, helping me navigate all the legal stuff, just listening when I needed to talk. I'd be honored if you'd stand up with me." Tears pricked my eyes, happy tears this time. "I'd love to." We spent the rest of brunch discussing wedding plans, potential venues, color schemes. It felt light and easy, the kind of conversation I should have been able to have with my sister or mother about happy life events. Instead, I had this chosen family, people who'd proven through actions, not just words, that they valued me. Walking back to my car later, I passed a family sitting at an outdoor cafe, parents, 2 adult daughters, laughing over mimosas. I felt a pang of loss watching them, wondering if they were really that happy or just performing happiness like my family had. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful I'd discovered the truth before wasting more years. Grateful I'd had the strength to walk away. Grateful for the life I was building now, brick by brick, on my own terms. That afternoon, I drafted an email to my boss formally applying for the senior architect position. Outlined my qualifications, my vision for the role, my goals for the team. Writing it felt empowering, advocating for myself, recognizing my own value. I'd spent so many years making myself small to accommodate others, never pushing for what I deserved. That version of Margaret felt like a stranger now. By evening, I was back in my garden, planting bulbs that would bloom next spring, tulips and daffodils that would push through the earth after a long winter of dormancy. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. I'd gone through my own winter this year, dark and cold and seemingly endless. But spring was coming. Maybe it was already here, in the new friendships, the healthy relationship, the career advancement, the peace I felt in my own home. My phone buzzed with another text, this time from my father. I'd blocked his number too, but apparently the whole family had gotten new phones. Margaret, your mother told me she wrote to you. I should have written sooner. Should have called, shown up, something. I was too proud and too ashamed. We failed you. I failed you. I don't know how to fix that or if I even can. But I want you to know I see it now. What we did. Who we were. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know. I stared at the message, then looked up at my house, my beautiful, peaceful house that I'd reclaimed. I thought about responding. Thought about what I might say. But in the end, I just saved the message in a folder marked family and set my phone aside. Maybe someday I'd respond. Maybe someday I'd be ready to cautiously rebuild some kind of relationship, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. Or maybe I wouldn't. Both options were okay. The important thing was that the choice was mine now. My life, my money, my home, my boundaries, my future, all mine to shape however I wanted. As the sun set over Austin, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, looking at the garden I'd planted, the home I'd created, the life I was building. It wasn't the life I'd imagined a year ago. That life had included parents who loved me, a sister who supported me, a family that was actually a team. But this life, this quiet, peaceful, authentic life, was better. Better because it was real. Better because the people in it had chosen me for who I was, not what I could provide. I pulled out my journal, something Dr. Wallace had encouraged me to keep. Under today's date, I wrote, 1 year since everything changed. 1 year since I heard the truth. 1 year since my old life ended and my new one began. I'm not grateful for the pain, but I'm grateful for the clarity. I'm grateful I found out before another decade passed. I'm grateful I had the courage to walk away and the strength to rebuild. I'm grateful for the person I'm becoming, someone who knows her worth, someone who demands respect, someone who chooses herself without apology. I closed the journal and watched the sky darken, stars beginning to appear. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my own bed, in my own house, surrounded by my own choices. I'd go to work on Monday and continue building my career. I'd have dinner with Jared on Tuesday and continue building our relationship. I'd meet with Dr. Wallace on Wednesday and continue building my understanding of myself. And through it all, I'd continue building a life that made me genuinely happy, not performing happiness for someone else's benefit, but actually, authentically happy. My family might never fully understand what they'd lost when they chose money over love. They might never grasp that the real tragedy wasn't the financial consequences of their theft, but the relational consequences of their betrayal. But I understood. I understood that love without respect isn't love at all. I understood that family doesn't give you license to use people. I understood that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're related by blood. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from a neighbor's yard. Inside, my house waited, empty of toxic relationships, full of possibility. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at home. Not because the space was perfect or because I had everything figured out, but because this space, this life, this future, it was all mine. Built on truth instead of lies, on boundaries instead of obligation, on self-respect instead of people-pleasing. I was Margaret, 33 years old, and I'd survived the shattering of everything I thought I knew about family. I'd survived the betrayal, the confrontation, the loss. And now I was doing more than surviving. I was thriving. Building a life so beautiful, so authentic, so genuinely mine that no amount of family approval could compare to the peace I felt living it. As I stood to head inside, my phone buzzed one final time. Jared, thinking about you. Hope you had a good day. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I smiled, texted back a heart emoji, and went inside to my quiet, perfect, reclaimed home. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and joys. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. And that was enough.